Hey guys, tonight's story starts with a suspiciously shaped carrot, a goat that definitely shouldn't be watching, and the sudden realization that haylofts echo more than you thought. It's the Middle Ages, where privacy is a myth, anatomy is a vague suggestion, and affection might just involve fermented turnips and a wedding that no one remembers consenting to. You're not a lord, not a knight, not even a stable hand. You're a peasant, and you've just been told the ritual for fertility luck involves a flute, a sheep, and 3 witnesses. Congratulations, you're in love. Possibly. But before you get too cozy, I just wanted to take a quiet moment to mention something new. I recently made another channel called Science to Fall Asleep To. It's a little different, but just as good for drifting off. You can find the link down in the description and pinned comment. But while you're here, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And of course, don't forget to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Alrighty, that's enough instructions for one night, isn't it? Now, get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You wake up with straw in your hair, something damp under your shoulder, and the distant sound of what could either be a dying goat or an enthusiastic bard. It's not your bed. You don't even own a bed. It's more like a polite pile of hay that agreed to host you overnight in exchange for your silence. Your mouth tastes like boiled turnips and maybe a little bit of shoe. The sun hasn't finished stretching yet, but a shadow looms over you like it's already decided you've slept too long. It's the village elder. He's wearing a cloak that smells like wet wool and expectations. Today, he says, like it's a verdict, is your turn for the flute. You blink. Your brain coughs. The what? The fertility flute, he says, as if that clears everything up. You sit up too quickly, hit your head on a low beam, and nod like this is completely normal, because everyone else is nodding too. A small group has gathered outside the barn. One of them hands you a boiled egg. Another pats your shoulder. No one explains anything. There is only the unspoken understanding that the time has come and you are going to blow the flute. You follow the elder through the village with the resigned gait of someone heading to their own symbolic demise. Chickens scatter in your path. A dog watches you with pity. The blacksmith waves, but it feels like a farewell. You reach the clearing behind the well, where a patch of flat earth has been swept clean, and a makeshift altar has been constructed from a wobbly stool and half a broken wheelbarrow. On top of it rests a wooden flute, carved with symbols that might be sacred or might just be very lazy spirals. Beside the flute stands a sheep. It looks at you. You look at it. You share a moment. The sheep chews thoughtfully on something invisible and blinks in solidarity. A priest stands nearby, clutching a bell with one hand and a very small book with the other. The book is blank. The bell is cracked. The elder clears his throat. Let the witnesses step forth. 3 villagers emerge from the bushes like summoned ghosts. One is the butcher's wife, already crying. One is old man Trigg, who may be asleep, standing up. The third is a child holding a thistle and a deeply confused expression. You are handed the flute. It is warm. You don't ask why. Play, says the priest. You raise the flute to your lips. Someone in the crowd hums. The sheep sneezes. You attempt a note. What emerges is not a sound so much as a wheeze with ambition. You try again. A shriek. The butcher's wife gasps like you've proposed. You lower the flute. The priest nods gravely. It is done. You blink. That's it? He frowns. You wish for more? No, you say too quickly. The elder steps forward and marks your forehead with something he insists is sacred ash, but smells like smoked eel. You are then handed a turnip wrapped in ribbon. You don't ask. The witnesses come forward to offer blessings. The butcher's wife kisses your cheek and tells you to name the first one after her cousin. Old man Trigg mutters something about trousers. The child gives you the thistle. The sheep sneezes again. You are told to sit quietly on the stump until the sun moves 3 fingers west. This is symbolic. No one knows why. You sit. The sheep joins you. For a while, it's peaceful. A bird lands nearby. You think you hear someone giggling behind the hedgerow, but it could also be wind or a very light scandal. Your foot falls asleep. You envy it. Finally, the elder returns with a cup of lukewarm broth and a nod of approval. You've done well, he says. The harvest will be strong. You want to ask what that has to do with anything, but your mouth has given up trying. Instead, you sip the broth, stroke the sheep's wool absent-mindedly, and pretend this was all exactly what you expected. Because now, apparently, you are a bringer of fertility. Or possibly just someone who blew into a stick and sat on a stump while livestock judged you. Back in the village, someone starts singing a song about you. It's not flattering. It involves rutabagas. You finish the broth, stand slowly, and walk back the way you came. The sheep follows you all the way home. You hold the turnip like it means something, like it holds power, like it might, if presented correctly, convince someone to overlook the fact that you have hay in your socks and a smell about you that could be best described as barn adjacent. You've wrapped the turnip in the cleanest cloth you own, which is to say, the least damp one. You've rubbed it with pig fat so it shines. You've even tied a bit of ribbon around the base, a detail that unfortunately makes it look like an extremely modest award for last place in a competition no one wanted to win. You are courting, allegedly. Her name is Mayless. She has teeth, most of them, and she once laughed at something you said, which is as good as a proposal in your experience. She's out near the well, drawing water with the stern focus of a woman who has lifted at least 3 buckets too many in her lifetime. You approach her slowly, holding the turnip like it might explode, or like you might. She glances at you. You clear your throat. For you say, presenting the root vegetable. She looks at it, then at you, then back at it. Is that boiled? Then, gently, you say. It is not gently boiled. It is raw. You panicked. She takes it anyway, mostly because the silence is becoming violent. You stand there. She stands there. The turnip sits between you, soaking up tension. You try to remember what comes next. You think there's supposed to be a compliment, something poetic, something about eyes, or elbows, or the smell of oats in spring. You remind me of wet bread, you say. She blinks. Pardon? No, sorry. Not bread. I meant strength. You're strong, like bread, left out in the rain, but in a powerful way. The silence that follows is thick and immediate. You hear a bee lose interest in life somewhere nearby. A chicken coughs. Mayless stares at you like she's calculating whether you're joking or just cursed. She opens her mouth to speak, but that's when the apothecary's apprentice barrels into the scene, flinging his arms like a windmill in distress. You didn't, he shouts. I did, you say, confused but confident. You used the sweat potion, didn't you? You freeze. The flask you poured on your neck this morning, the one labeled with a symbol you thought meant romance, was apparently a blend of garlic oil, goat sweat, and crushed beetle thorax. You're not sure what any of that does, but it's currently dripping down your collar and sizzling faintly in the sunlight. Mayless's nose twitches. Her mouth opens in horror. Oh, sweet rot, she mutters, and backs away like you're contagious, which technically you might be. I was told it would increase appeal, you say. Sensual appeal. The apprentice wheezes. It's for healing hoof rot. Something shifts behind you. There's a rustle, Then a voice. "Did I hear correctly?" asks Elric, the miller's son, who looks like he's never been denied anything except volume control. He steps forward, beaming. "You're proposing to me?" You blink. "What?" "The turnip, the sweat, the ceremony of second fragrance. I read about it in the Southern Codex. Very symbolic." "I wasn't." Elric takes your hands. "I accept." "You what?" A small crowd has formed. Someone cheers. Someone else begins humming the melody they use for weddings that require expedited annulment. Malus, holding the turnip like it's haunted, watches with the flat expression of a woman filing a memory under permanent caution. You try to explain, but Elric is already pulling you toward the altar stump. The priest, who has never declined a chance to declare something holy, is already preparing the bell. The apothecary's apprentice tries to intervene but trips over a bucket and is eaten by moss, or just ignored. Either way, a garland is thrown around your neck. Someone throws flower petals. You think they're petals. They might be onion skins. You are now engaged, possibly married. To Elric, who is singing to you, loudly, off-key, and swaying. Malus leaves without a word, dropping the turnip into the well as she goes. It lands with a splash that somehow feels final. You stand beside your new suitor, covered in goat sweat, stinking of desperation and poor decisions, and wonder if maybe next time you should just send a note. You are led by the arm like someone being honored, but with slightly more dread and considerably less confidence. The village matchmaker, a woman who always smells faintly of boiled leek and carries herself like a queen of mediocre choices, has declared that you and your chosen companion are to take the next step, which, here, apparently means being gently shoved toward the communal barn with a wink and a piece of burlap to lie on. They don't give you a key because there are no keys, just a latch made of twine and shame. You open the door slowly, hoping maybe, just maybe, it's empty. It is not. Inside are 3 chickens, all of whom look personally offended by your presence. One of them flaps up onto a rafter and stares down at you like it's keeping score. In the corner, sitting absolutely still on an upturned bucket, is Brother Cuthwin, the village monk, who opens one eye and murmurs, "Ignore me, I'm meditating." You freeze. Your companion, who is already visibly doubting everything about this, leans in. "Is he always here?" You nod, though you're not entirely sure. To the left, in the straw pile that should be yours by sacred right of peasant romance, there is a figure curled under a blanket that was definitely once a curtain. The figure lifts their head slowly, revealing a man with a beard that seems to grow in all directions at once, and eyes that carry the quiet madness of someone who hasn't slept indoors since the plague. "This is my room," he says. You open your mouth, but he continues. "Since Tuesday, I declared it." Your companion is backing toward the door now. The chickens are growing louder. Brother Cuthwin hums ominously. You try to salvage the moment. You lay down the burlap square in the only unclaimed patch of dirt, right between a suspicious puddle and a bucket labeled, "Do not kick." You motion with your hands like you're inviting someone into a royal suite instead of a barely sanitary accident waiting to happen. Your companion doesn't move. "I'm not doing this with an audience," they whisper. You glance at the chickens, the monk, the man in the curtain blanket who has started eating something from his beard. Then you glance back and nod in agreement. You leave the barn 5 minutes later, still unmarried, still uncertain, and with a new chicken friend that refuses to get off your shoulder. You're only at the river because you spilled something unspeakable on your only tunic, and it's either wash it now or become the village's unofficial warning about the dangers of fermented radish wine. The riverbank is quiet at first, just the sound of water slapping lazily against rocks and the distant groan of someone losing a tug of war with a mule. You roll up your sleeves, kneel by the water, and begin the age-old ritual of scrubbing something aggressively while pretending to know what you're doing. Then you hear it, the laughter, soft at first, like bees gossiping. Then louder, sharper, unmistakably human, and terrifyingly female. You freeze. There, just around the bend, are 5 women squatting on stones like judgmental forest sprites. Their hands are busy with linens, but their mouths are even busier. You can't see them clearly, but the acoustics are cruel and precise. I told her, if he eats that much garlic again, he's sleeping with the pigs. A burst of laughter. And not the good pigs either, the jealous ones. You consider backing away, maybe sneaking off before anyone notices, but your tunic is now soaked and flopped across a rock like a sea creature dying of embarrassment. You hunker lower, partially hidden behind a bush that smells like wet mint and sheep breath. You tell yourself you'll only listen for a minute, just enough to make sure it's not about you. It is. Oh, and did you hear what happened with that one who brought the turnip to Melis? Silence. Then the sound of fabric being wrung with unusual aggression. Oh gods, yes. He gave her raw root and a speech about wet bread. More laughter, violent this time. Someone snorts. You sit motionless, holding a sudsy rag and questioning every decision that led you here, beginning with birth. Then Elric thought it was a proposal, said yes on the spot. I heard they kissed on the forehead like a blessing. No, that was the priest. He said it was the only legal option available. You bury your face in the tunic, hoping it will drown out the sound, or at least suffocate your spirit. The laughter continues, warm and terrible. You hear a splash, a slap, and then a quieter tone. But I will say this, he's got nice hands. A pause. I noticed that too. Someone else chimes in. Good hands, bad choices. A third concludes. You don't know how to feel about any of this. You've never once considered your hands outside of their ability to carry firewood and fail at intimacy. Now, they're a topic of debate. One of them giggles. I wouldn't say no to a hayloft moment, is all I'm saying. Someone claps. Someone else makes a sound that might be a sigh or a goat's opinion on the matter. You peek between the leaves. They're smiling, joking, scrubbing with the rhythm of people who've done this every week since the invention of shame. And then it happens. Did you hear what he called her? Powerful like wet bread. Your name is said again, paired with the kind of wheezing that makes you worry someone's going to pass out into the rinse water. You can't take it anymore. You grab your tunic, still dripping and only marginally cleaner, and begin to sneak away. Unfortunately, wet feet and mossy rocks do not make for silent exits. You slip, you flail, you land with a splash so dramatic it could be scored by a traveling bard. 5 heads whip around. Oh no, someone says, delighted. It's him, says another, even more delighted. You freeze, soaked, caught, and now officially baptized in humiliation. One of them waves cheerfully. Another raises an eyebrow and nods at your tunic. Still smells like turnip, she says. They return to their scrubbing like you're a mildly entertaining footnote in the day's story. You slosh away with your head down and your tunic clinging to you like a needy ghost. Behind you, the laughter starts up again, softer now, but no less merciless. And for a brief, cursed moment, you think you hear someone say, "Still, nice hands though." It starts with a simple act of nosiness. You're in the chapel, technically helping Father Aldrich polish the candlesticks, but mostly just avoiding your neighbor, who insists you're still engaged to Elric, despite your very public attempts to drown yourself in the river to escape him. The priest has stepped out to deal with a theological emergency involving a goat and a stolen communion wafer, which leaves you alone in the dimly lit vestry with a lot of sacred objects and a dangerous amount of curiosity. There's a drawer behind the altar labeled herbs and salves, which seems harmless enough. You're halfway through rummaging for absolutely no reason when your hand hits something that's definitely not a salve. It's wrapped in old cloth, tied with string, and tucked so deep in the drawer it might as well be trying to escape sin itself. Naturally, you open it. The first page is harmless Latin script, faded ink, a drawing of a tree that might also be a very confused chicken. But then you turn the page, and the tone shifts dramatically. There are diagrams, anatomical ones, explicit ones. There are positions labeled with names like the flourishing vine and the eastern mule, accompanied by notes in the margins like do not attempt during fasts and try this with a firm mattress, good luck. You flip faster. Some pages are water-stained. Others are smudged with what you hope is candle wax. Every few turns, a new phrase jumps out and slaps your sense of decency in the face. To awaken a wife's humors, begin at the heel and proceed north with confidence. Excessive tickling may provoke hysteria or enthusiasm. The left earlobe is a powerful symbol of submission among the pics. You stop at a page that features an illustration so detailed, so undeniably ambitious, you have to sit down. The artist who has not signed their work, perhaps out of fear or deep shame, has rendered it with almost sacred precision, shading, perspective, emotion in the eyes. You tilt your head. The eyes might be yours. At the bottom of the page is a note written in a shaky hand. Never speak of this to Bishop Ralph. The manuscript is old, Roman, judging by the phrasing and the occasional Hail Caesar inserted mid-sentence. But the marginalia, the messy, desperate handwriting commenting things like, tried this, got bruises, and Elric would break in half, is unmistakably local. Someone in this village has been using this as a manual, possibly several someones. And then the worst part, a fresh edition, in red ink. Refer to page 43 for turnip variation. You fumble to page 43. There it is. A crude drawing of a turnip with very specific holes carved into it. There are arrows, labels, and another note. For use during long winters or uncooperative spouses. The door creaks open. You slam the manuscript shut and spin around, knocking over a candle and nearly setting your tunic on fire. Father Aldrich steps in, holding a chicken by the legs and muttering about demonic possession. He looks at you. He looks at the drawer. He raises an eyebrow so slowly it becomes a moral judgment. I was dusting. You lie. With your eyes? He asks. There's a silence. You offer him the candle as if that somehow restores innocence. He sighs and sets the chicken on the altar. It's medical, he says at last. Walking past you like this happens twice a week. Roman medicine, very advanced. The church, no, still deciding what to do with it. You nod. You consider running into the wall to erase this moment from your memory. Keep it to yourself, he adds, and then, more softly, page 17 is nonsense. No one has that kind of balance. You leave the chapel a changed person. The wind feels different on your face. The bird song sounds vaguely suggestive. You pass Elric on the road and avoid eye contact, just in case he recognizes himself in one of the illustrations. Back home, you stare at your blanket for a long time, then flip it over, just to be safe. It begins, like most village catastrophes, with someone trusting the apothecary, specifically your friend Osric, who has the self-preservation instincts of a buttered log and the romantic experience of a moss-covered stump. He tells you, very proudly, that he's found the answer to his heartache. You assume he's going to take a walk, write a sad poem, or finally move on from the woman who once accidentally handed him the wrong loaf of bread and hasn't spoken to him since. Instead, he drinks something that smells like fermented rutabaga and boiled armpit. He does this in front of the apothecary's hut, smiling like he's just solved life. The potion glows faintly purple, not in a magical way, more in a this was stored near a leaking candle sort of way. You watch him tip it back, gag slightly, then blink 3 times in rapid succession. He sighs. I feel open, he says. You wait. He turns around slowly. His eyes land on an oak tree at the edge of the path. It's old, gnarled, covered in bird droppings. It has never been accused of charisma. Osric clutches his chest like, He's been struck by divine thunder. There she is, he whispers. You squint. Where? He points. Her. Look at the curvature, the bark, the mystery in her knots. That's a tree. She understands me. You try to stop him, but he's already halfway across the field, arms open, reciting something that might be poetry or just the sounds his soul makes when it gives up. You march back to the apothecary's door, throw it open, and demand answers. She doesn't even look up from her mortar. Oh, he took the purple one? Yes. Idiot. Fix it. She sighs like someone who's had this conversation too many times and opens a drawer labeled Consequences. From it, she pulls a bundle of chicken feathers and a scroll. You already know you're not going to like what's coming next. To reverse the effects of potion 6B, she reads, the afflicted must be gently tickled with enchanted plumage while a limerick is recited thrice under moonlight. The tickler must maintain eye contact and a steady rhyme scheme. You stare at her. You made that up. I really didn't, she says, handing you the feathers. And hurry. The longer he bonds with the tree, the more permanent it becomes. When you find Osric again, he's seated at the base of the oak, whispering sweet nothings to its trunk. He's braided a flower crown and placed it lovingly on a low-hanging branch. He's also shirtless now, which is concerning on many levels. You take a breath, raise the feathers, and begin to tickle. He yelps, squirms, and tries to embrace the tree for protection. You wrestle him gently away, mumbling the first limerick that comes to mind. There once was a man from the glade, whose affections were awkwardly laid. He kissed on the bark, left splinters as marks, and now he just wants lemonade. Osric groans like you've struck him with logic. You keep going. The second limerick makes even less sense. The third involves a questionable rhyme with smooch. But on the final word, Osric gasps, blinks, and looks around as if awakening from a fever dream. He sees the tree, then the flower crown, then you, mid-tickle, holding feathers like a deranged poultry wizard. Oh no, he whispers. You called her your forest bride. I proposed to her with a beetle. You help him stand. The rash developing on his neck is probably unrelated, but still unsettling. He coughs, dusts himself off, and tries to act like none of it happened. You don't say a word, but you know he's going to avoid trees for a long while. You toss the feathers into the creek on the way back, and make a silent vow to never let Osric near anything labeled potion again, especially if it glows, rhymes, or comes with its own set of feathers. You just want a pitchfork. That's it. A humble, rust-speckled pitchfork to deal with the pile of aggressively rotting turnips behind your hut before they develop sentience and unionize. You're not here for drama, scandal, or anything involving partial nudity and poorly timed acoustics. But the barn door creaks open in that ominous way that barns do, and from the moment you step inside, the air feels heavy. Not just with dust and goat breath, but with the charged tension of something witnessed. There's a sound from the hayloft, a muffled thump, a gasp, then silence. You freeze mid-step, hand halfway to the pitchfork, leaning against the wall. The animals are suspiciously quiet. Even the rooster, who normally takes great pride in crowing at anything that moves, seems to have called a truce with the moment. You wait. Then a giggle high, breathy, unmistakably smug drifts down from the loft, followed by a whisper of straw fluttering to the ground like snow made of secrets. You take a step back. The giggle turns into a moan, followed by a squeaky noise that can only be described as emotionally complicated hay. You really should leave, but your foot lands on an old rake. It clatters against the wall, and the entire loft erupts in chaos. A squeal, a curse. Someone shouts, "It's a goat." No, wait, it's him. You make eye contact with Willem as he pokes his head over the edge of the loft, shirtless and red-faced, bits of hay in places hay should never be. Behind him, Marla ducks out of sight so quickly, you hear her elbow connect with a rafter. A boot falls. You raise your hand. I was just... No one say anything, Willem barks, already trying to button a shirt that clearly wasn't made for haste. You grab the pitchfork and back slowly toward the door, but it's too late. Old Krita is standing outside, arms crossed, eyes squinting. The universal posture of, I heard enough to ruin your lineage. What's all this then? She asks. Willem tries to climb down gracefully and lands in a heap. Marla appears a moment later, hair full of straw, trying to look like someone who merely fell asleep near scandal and had nothing to do with its orchestration. You don't say a word. You just stand there with your pitchfork, accidentally complicit. And then Krita bends down, picks up a handful of hay, holds it to her nose like she's judging fine wine, and says, activity. By evening, the entire village knows. The tale spreads like a hayfire. Willem and Marla discovered mid-courtship in the loft, while you, poor, confused and innocent, witnessed it all with pitchfork in hand and judgment in your eyes. Children ask if the hay is cursed now. Someone starts charging a viewing fee. Brother Cuthwin insists on blessing the barn, twice, just to be safe. The hay becomes legend. People walk past it and nod solemnly. They refer to it as the bedding of betrayal or Willem's folly. Someone tries to burn it, but the fire refuses to catch, which only makes things worse. Rumors start about the straw being possessed by passion itself. A neighbor swears she heard it whispering on a windless night. You think it'll die down in a week, but 3 days later, a traveling poet arrives, having heard of the lover's loft affair, and begins reciting an epic ballad involving forbidden desire and aggressively judgmental goats. Marla refuses to speak of it. Willem walks around as though he's been knighted by scandal. And you, pitchfork in hand, are now somehow the keeper of the loft, which is not a job you asked for but seems to be yours anyway. Years from now, children will ask what really happened that day, and you'll shake your head, look off into the distance, and say only, the hay remembers. You wake up to the sound of drums. Not war drums, which would almost be preferable, but the festive kind that always means someone in the village council had an idea, and tragically, nobody stopped them. Outside, the square is full of bunting. Bunting never means good things. Osric finds you before you've even had a chance to fake a chore to escape the crowd. He's breathless, jittery, and wearing a flower crown that suggests he's been drafted into something against his will. It's today, he says, eyes wide. Affection-judging day. You stare at him, blinking slowly. That's not a real thing. It is now, he says grimly. Turns out, the village elders bored, and likely influenced by an overly romantic bard passing through, decided that stable unions need celebration and judgment. It's unclear which is more important. Couples will compete for the Heart of the Harvest title by proving their bond through riddles, coordinated dances, and something referred to as a shared gaze of truth. You try to back away. You bump into someone. She's about your age, vaguely familiar, possibly a neighbor or just someone who passes you carrots sometimes without smiling. You've nodded at her, twice. Her name might be Gilda, or maybe Bryn. Either way, she looks just as alarmed as you do. A bell rings. Names, hers are shouted. Yours and hers are shouted together. You've been paired. You turn to protest, but the matchmaker just waves a clipboard and mutters something about emotional proximity scores. A whistle blows, and suddenly you're standing in the middle of the square, surrounded by people who are either way too excited or way too invested in your romantic future. The first challenge is a riddle. The judge, who is definitely drunk on cider and self-importance, reads it aloud. What binds two souls, yet has no form, cannot be held, and sometimes smells faintly of onions? Your partner stares at the judge. You stare at her. She raises an eyebrow. You whisper, affection? She mutters, shared laundry? You both shrug and say, trust. The judge claps like you've discovered fire. You move on. Next comes the dance. You're given 2 handkerchiefs and told to perform a routine of spontaneous harmony. Neither of you speaks. The music starts something involving lutes, spoons, and deep regret, and you do what can only be described as synchronized flailing. She spins, you spin, she stumbles, you pretend it was a dip. At one point, you both end up hopping on one foot while waving the handkerchiefs like surrender flags. It's either brilliant or deeply concerning. The crowd loves it. Last comes the shared gaze. You're supposed to look into each other's eyes for 30 full seconds without blinking, laughing, or crying. The pressure is immediate. Her eyes are green, possibly hazel. You've never looked this long at anyone without eventually handing them bread. You hold the stare. You feel a sneeze coming. You hold it. She blinks, then smirks. You blink too. Apparently that counts as chemistry. The crowd erupts. Somehow, you've won. A garland is placed around your shoulders. Your hands are joined ceremonially. The mayor declares you the affection pair of the season. You're showered with barley. Someone throws a cabbage. There's a goat, nibbling your tunic in celebration. Later, the 2 of you sit on a bench, still mildly stunned, still vaguely unsure of each other's names. She nudges you with her elbow. "Well," she says, "we're legally affectionate now." You nod. She stands. "See you at the next festival. Unless we're married by then." You're not sure if she's joking. You're not sure if you're hoping she is. You watch her walk away, flower crown tilted slightly, and wonder how many life decisions start with a nod and end with a cabbage. The market square is too loud for a Tuesday. Normally, you can count on it to be a predictable parade of root vegetables, suspiciously damp bread, and old women arguing over turnip girth. But today there's a crowd gathered around the fountain, clapping along to something with a rhythm far too enthusiastic for a place where most people are powered by porridge and passive aggression. You push your way through, past a man selling beets out of a wheelbarrow shaped like a coffin, and find the source. A traveling minstrel with a feather in his cap, so large it might qualify as a second person. He's strumming a lute that's seen better centuries and smiling with the reckless confidence of someone who's never had to face the consequences of rhyme. He belts out the final verse of his current song. His heart was bold, his pants were tight, he wooed the goose by candlelight. The crowd explodes with laughter. A few villagers are already singing along. You feel a sense of rising dread, because the chorus is coming, and you already know the name. Oh, Sir Turnip Heart, with love so deep, he serenades geese while others sleep. By moon and mud, by feather and fart, no beast untouched by Turnip Heart. People are clapping. Someone whistles. A child who doesn't even know what wooing is shouts, "Again." You want to melt into the ground, because Sir Turnip Heart isn't just a character. He's your cousin, Fendrel, a man so allergic to effort that he once tried to hire someone to attend his own arranged marriage. A man who once tried to bathe in milk but forgot to milk the cows first. He's many things: confused, enthusiastic, perpetually damp. But he's definitely not the romantic titan this song makes him out to be. Yet here he comes, striding through the square like a man approaching his own statue. He's even wearing a cape now. Fendrel has never owned a cape. You suspect it's just a blanket he stole from someone's laundry line, but no one's stopping him, because the minstrel just added a new verse about his velvet cloak of yearning. You corner him by the pickle cart. Did you pay him? Fendrel grins. Of course not. He witnessed me. He said I moved like a poem trapped in a man. You tripped on a duck and cried for an hour. A powerful hour, he says, adjusting the cloak. It awakened something in him. And, I believe, in the duck. You glance over at the minstrel. He's now drawing an enthusiastic diagram in the dirt, possibly illustrating optimal goose-wooing stance. People nod thoughtfully. One woman fans herself. Fendrel, he's saying you seduced a goose. He beams. Metaphor. He used the word literally 6 times. Fendrel shrugs. Art. The song continues, growing in complexity and audacity. There's a section now involving stolen eggs, a misunderstanding with a bishop, and a romantic duel conducted entirely through eyebrow movement. None of it happened. You were there. The only thing Fendrel has ever successfully wooed is a loaf of bread, and that was mostly by sitting on it. And yet, the crowd believes. They hum the melody. A small group begins rehearsing the dance moves to the chorus, which involves flapping and suggestive winking. A merchant begins carving Sir Turnip Heart into decorative spoons. You try to argue. You list facts. But the facts are no match for the refrain. By sundown, Fendrel has signed a fan's apron. A goat is named after him, and 3 people are planning a play. You retreat home, defeated, only to find someone has painted a heart-shaped turnip on your door. You scrape it off in silence, then pause. Because the tune is stuck in your head, you think you're just participating in a wholesome tradition, a quaint little matchmaking ritual, something involving cloth scraps and vague symbols harmless, like the folk version of tossing a note into a bottle, but with slightly more splinters. The wall of hopes goes up overnight on the side of the abandoned cider barn. Someone, likely the same council member who invented affection judging day, decides that swiping left is too modern and that the true way to a partner's heart is through interpretive fabric nailed to a piece of timber. The rules are simple. Tie a ribbon, attach a symbol, and wait for suitors to interpret your romantic intentions like an emotional scavenger hunt. Red means longing, blue is steadfastness, yellow is open-mindedness, and so on. There's a chart. It's confusing. There's a goat chewing one of the samples. Still, people love it. You decide to try. You find an old bit of linen, draw a modest sun for warmth, a tree for stability, and because you're feeling optimistic, what you think is the symbol for adventurous spirit. It's a little swirl with 3 dots. You're fairly certain. You hammer it up with everyone else's, give it a proud little nod, and go home feeling mildly pleased with yourself. By morning, you are known as the foot enthusiast. Apparently, the swirl with 3 dots is not the mark of adventure, but a lesser-known sigil from a traveling tailor's romance guide, translated poorly and associated specifically with a strong, very strong preference for feet. Not just a passing interest, an all-consuming, soul-binding, toenail-centric obsession. You learn this from Osric, who knocks on your door before sunrise, waving a scrap of parchment with a crude drawing of the symbol, and laughing so hard he nearly chokes on a pickled radish. "You'll want to fix that," he says between wheezes, "unless you're enjoying the attention." You are not. There's already been a note slipped under your door. No name, just the words "calloused and available," written in startlingly elegant script. The second note contains a poem that begins with "O ye of the nimble ankle" and ends with "May I be the slipper to your soul." You remove your ribbon immediately. It's too late. The message has spread. People now whisper when you walk past. Someone bows when they see your feet. An elderly woman offers you her late husband's boot polish with a wink that feels like a curse. Later that afternoon, you find a basket outside your hut. It contains a pair of socks, some kind of scented ointment, and a small hand-carved toe ring. The accompanying note reads, "To keep your treasures warm." You retreat inside, close all the shutters, and reconsider every decision that led you here. The worst part comes at dusk. The minstrel, yes, that minstrel is back, and he's heard the rumors. He debuts a song called "Lover of Souls" at the evening gathering. It has rhythm, it has clapping, it has a verse that rhymes arch with starch in a way that should be illegal. He dedicates it to the mysterious, soft-hearted stranger with an eye for fine footwear. Osric finds you hiding behind a barrel and offers you a new ribbon to try. "Maybe just go with blue," he says kindly. "Everyone likes blue." You nod, defeated, clutching the toe ring like a cursed relic. Next morning, you tie up a new cloth, plain and unassuming. Blue. No symbols, no swirl. You hammer it in quickly and try to walk away unnoticed. Someone calls out, "New one's up." You keep walking. Someone else adds, "Hope it still means toes." You start running, but you know in your heart, they will never forget. It begins, like most medieval misunderstandings, with carbohydrates. You're told that bread is a sacred part of courtship here, not just food, a language, a ritual, a legally binding system of intent wrapped in crust and superstition. Apparently, the village follows something called the loaf law, an ancient and very poorly documented tradition in which romantic consent is expressed, negotiated, and accidentally promised through the giving of specific types of bread. The rules are baffling. Round loaves mean affection. Long loaves suggest fertility. Stale loaves express hesitation. Sliced bread is considered aggressively forward. And if you break a loaf with someone, specifically snap it in half in view of a goose, it's interpreted as a public declaration of impending union. You ask why the goose matters. They say, because it always watches. You nod like that's normal. So when your neighbor Elda mentions she's been feeling a bit open to companionship, depending on the needing, you panic and try to be supportive. You bake a loaf, a simple, unsliced, slightly round loaf with extra garlic, because you heard somewhere that garlic is an ancient symbol of vitality, or possibly warding, maybe both. It smells wonderful. You deliver it to her doorstep, place it gently on the bench, and walk away feeling like a considerate modern medieval person. You do not anticipate being engaged by sundown, because here's what you didn't know. Garlic bread, under loaf law, is used only in one specific circumstance. It's not affection, it's not courtship, it's proposal. It's the bread equivalent of dropping to one knee while shouting your intentions to a crowded tavern. Elda accepts. You find this out when she appears at your hut later that day holding a basket of pickled radishes, which in this region is the traditional dowry gift of serious commitment. She's beaming. Her hair is braided with lavender. She says, "I do," before you even open your mouth. You stare at her. You do what? The garlic spoke for you. You try to explain. You really do. But by now the goose has seen everything, and that carries weight. You are summoned to the village square, where the matchmaker clutches a ledger that looks like it predates vowels and announces, under loaf law, the bond is recognized. Osric leans in and whispers, "Should have gone with barley flatbread. That's the bread of cautious optimism." You want to throw a bun at him. Instead, you attempt diplomacy. You sit with Elda. You share your confusion. She listens patiently, then bursts out laughing so hard she snorts. You didn't mean it? You shake your head. She wipes her eyes and sighs. Shame. I was already planning the name of our goat. You offer to bake her a loaf of apology bread. She tells you that's traditionally rye with a burnt edge and 3 intentional dents. You make it. She accepts it with a grin and ruffles your hair like you're a confused duckling who wandered into a marriage by accident. Later, at the tavern, someone raises a mug and toasts, "To the garlic groom." The song that follows is short but memorable. And the goose? Still watching. Always. The rules are shouted once, then never repeated. Typical. You're pulled into the middle of the village square by someone who looks far too pleased with themselves and told that you're now part of the silent seduction circle, a yearly tradition meant to bring eligible hearts together through the art of non-verbal yearning. You ask if it's like charades. They shake their heads solemnly. Worse. The circle is marked in chalk, although it looks suspiciously like dried milk, and everyone inside is already posturing in weird and alarming ways. One man is fluttering his hands near his face like a moth doing ballet. A woman to your left is miming the peeling of an invisible turnip while maintaining prolonged eye contact. With the blacksmith, someone near the well is engaged in what can only be described as interpretive haystacking. You don't know what to do with your arms or your face. You decide to just copy what you think is the least threatening action. a slow beckon with one hand while smiling gently. Unfortunately, this is immediately interpreted as a mating signal in the local goat herding dialect. The goats are nearby. They are always nearby. You're being watched by at least two of them now. One of them has locked eyes with you in a way that feels disturbingly intentional. Still, you press on, committed to the bit. You mime the offering of a flower. People nod, encouraging. You mime catching a fish, confusing but oddly poetic. Then, trying to appear strong and protective, you pantomime, lifting a bale of hay and placing it down carefully, except the way you squat and raise your arms makes it look more like you're preparing to cradle something or someone. That's when the goat approaches. At first it just saunters by, but then it pauses, gives a sort of approving huff, and plants itself next to you. It stares forward, very calm, as if also participating. You attempt to mime, shooing it away gently, but combined with your previous gestures, it reads as something else entirely. A narrative is forming, a tragic romance, forbidden affection, you and the goat, star-crossed. The crowd begins murmuring. Someone gasps. The blacksmith nods slowly and says, "Bold." You panic and try to switch tactics, miming playing a lute, then a harp, then inexplicably milking a cow. None of this helps, especially not the milking. Now it looks like you're proposing to serenade your livestock lover with an original ballad before retiring together into a shared hovel of hay and dreams. The goat is now licking your boot. You exit the circle immediately, but it's too late. The legend has been born. Later that evening, as you hide behind the flower cart, you hear someone humming what might be the beginnings of a new tavern tune. The words, "hoofbeats of passion," drift past your ear like a curse. Osric finds you and claps a hand on your shoulder. "I thought the mimed shearing was especially moving," he says. "I wasn't shearing. I was folding laundry." "Well, that makes it worse." You glance across the square. The goat is still there, still watching. It blinks, very slowly, and somewhere in the crowd, someone starts painting a mural. You see a shape forming vaguely human, vaguely goat, very unsettling. You pull your hood low and decide to stop participating in local customs for a while, or possibly forever. It starts with a sneeze, a violent, sudden, full-body convulsion that rattles your skull and accidentally echoes across the stone courtyard. Just as Father Aldrich lifts his hands to bless the union of two very confused villagers who may or may not even know each other's names. It's one of those open ceremonies where anyone in the village can show up and be legally joined to someone else with just the right timing and a strong sense of whimsy. The only requirement is a sound of agreement during the moment of declaration. Unfortunately, your sneeze is loud, too loud, dramatically timed, followed by a sniff that the priest apparently interprets as a tearful yes. He turns toward you with startling swiftness. "And so it is done," he declares. By sound and spirit, witnessed by goat and God alike, these two souls are now entwined. You look around. Everyone's clapping. You try to speak, but someone thrusts a flower crown into your hands. It's wilted, but the gesture feels worryingly permanent. There's murmuring. The name Imelda floats toward you like the scent of overcooked cabbage. You try to ask who Imelda is, but your voice is drowned out by the bells someone started ringing far too enthusiastically. You scan the crowd, searching for a matching pair of equally horrified eyes. There are none. Either Imelda is shockingly composed or, more likely, entirely fictional. You consider clarifying the situation, but the moment's passed. A cart rolls up with stew. Someone pats your back and mutters, "Marriage suits you." A child tugs your sleeve and asks when the goat parade starts. "What goat parade?" They shrug. "Weddings always have one." You're given a seat at the feast table. A large, steaming bowl is placed in front of you. The stew is oddly specific turnips, nettles, and a very aggressive quantity of onion, which apparently symbolizes union. You're handed a wooden spoon with the initials I+ carved into the handle. You ask who made it. No one knows. By mid-afternoon, someone's gifted you a set of matching socks. Another brings a hay-stuffed pillow with embroidered initials that do not match yours but are declared close enough. A few villagers now refer to you in the plural. Imelda remains unseen. Osric, of course, finds the whole thing delightful. He sits beside you eating your stew and offers theories. She might be a ghost bride, he says between slurps, or cursed, or a metaphor, or, hear me out, a very shy badger who happens to understand Latin. You ask why Latin matters. Well, she answered the priest, didn't she? That was me. Sneezing. He points with his spoon. Still counts. You try to return the flower crown. You're told that once wilted in union, it cannot be unwilted. A woman named Gertrude says this with such confidence you suspect she just made it up, but no one challenges her. By evening, a small wooden plaque appears on your door, home of the newlyweds. It's nailed in with unnecessary commitment. You consider pulling it down. You don't. That night, you sit by your hearth, stew leftovers in hand, the faint echo of celebratory goat bells ringing in the distance. You are married now, apparently, to a woman who might be a myth, or a mistranslation, or a very distant cousin who legally changed her name to avoid chores and now lives in a different village entirely. You sigh and sip your stew. It tastes like commitment. You're just trying to enjoy your ale, that's all. A quiet evening at the tavern, maybe a crust of bread if you're lucky, and the faint, comforting sound of someone arguing about turnip taxes in the corner. Nothing out of the ordinary, until the door crashes open like a dramatic sigh from the universe, and in storms a couple so entangled it's hard to tell where one ends and the other begins. They're flushed, disheveled, and suspiciously shiny, and they're definitely not here for stew. You try not to stare. Everyone tries not to stare, but it's like watching two overripe pears wrestle in a grain sack. There's moaning, there's giggling, there's a very audible slurp that might haunt your dreams forever. The barkeep, a woman named Hilda with arms like ham hocks and the moral rigidity of a cathedral, wastes no time. That's it, she bellows. Out. You're banned. 7 moons, maybe more. They plead, they pout, they knock over a candle and accidentally ignite someone's sleeve, and then they are gone, shoved into the night by Hilda's iron grip, leaving behind only the lingering scent of sweat and poorly brewed cherry wine. You think it's over. It is not over. The next morning, you are summoned. Apparently, because you once helped find a missing goat using only a muddy footprint and a hunch, you are now considered reliable in delicate matters. That's how they describe it. Delicate. You are brought to the bathhouse, a structure so poorly insulated it shivers in the wind like a remorseful mushroom, and greeted by the village healer. She is holding a bucket of vinegar, a fistful of mint leaves, and what appears to be a ceremonial paddle. You do not ask why she owns this. We need to cleanse them, she says flatly. You open your mouth to object. But then the couple enters, still shiny, now also itchy. Apparently, they have lice, which, given their enthusiasm for bodily contact in public spaces, is not exactly shocking. What is shocking is the ritual the healer insists must be followed. Step 1. Douse the afflicted with vinegar. Liberally, it must be done with intention, she says. You do your best. You try not to make eye contact. You fail. Step 2. Mint leaf application. These must be rubbed onto the scalp, chest, and spirit zones, which no one defines clearly enough. You attempt to stay above the neck. The couple laughs a lot. You do not. Step 3 is where you lose your composure, the spanking. It is described as a symbolic banishment of pestilence, which feels like a stretch. The healer hands you the paddle. You look at her. She nods solemnly. You swat. They giggle. You swat again, more firmly, and the man thanks you. You consider walking into the river and staying there. The ritual concludes with a shared chant, some drumming on empty barrels, and the lighting of a scented candle that does absolutely nothing to mask the vinegar. The couple, now dripping, minty, and surprisingly cheerful, thanks you profusely and offers to name their next child after you. You decline. By afternoon, word has spread. Osric finds you in the marketplace and bows with exaggerated reverence. Deliverer of cheeks, he calls you. You glare. I meant the lice thing, he adds, unconvincingly. Later that evening, you pass the tavern. The couple is outside, whispering, trying to peek through the windows like enthusiastic raccoons. You catch the woman muttering, "Maybe if we promise not to touch tongues." You don't stick around to hear the rest. You walk home, wondering when exactly your life pivoted from quiet obscurity to licorice-scented pest control specialist. The mint leaves are still clinging to your tunic, and no amount of scrubbing has removed the vinegar from your skin. You lie awake that night, every itch a phantom one, every creak outside your door a potential return of the overly affectionate. You pray, softly and sincerely, for just one normal day. The moon is too bright. That's your first thought when you step outside, your foot squishing into something that might be a fermented carrot, might be a frog, and might be both. It's hard to tell in this light. The village is glowing, not in a mystical, serene kind of way, but in the unhinged manner of a place where nobody has slept and everyone has ideas. The full moon has arrived, and with it, chaos. They say it affects the humors, stirs the blood, makes decent people do indecent things, and indecent people start cults. You didn't believe that until this week. It starts with the moaning. Not ghostly moaning, not the haunted wails of some tragic spectral baker. No, these are extremely alive moans, rising from behind the well, like someone's putting on a very committed play, with no script and too much enthusiasm. It lasts for a full hour. Someone bangs a pot rhythmically at one point. You assume it's part of the ceremony, or the complaint. The next morning, a woman named Alfreda marches into the council hut carrying a scroll labeled Noise Ordinance Proposal, Lunar Edition, and starts shouting about her hens being too traumatized to lay. They've seen things, she says, eyes wide. They cluck in code now. Nobody questions her. By midday, 5 people have declared themselves unexpectedly with child. No one knows with whom. 2 of the pregnancies might be metaphorical. One is being celebrated with a banner that says, "Guess what?" nailed sideways onto a sheep. The healer refuses to comment. Osric, of course, thrives in this madness. He starts selling moon protection charms, which are just acorns glued to bark with wax. People buy them anyway. He gives you one for free, says you look vulnerable to emotional combustion. You throw it into a bush. Then comes the cult. They call themselves the children of the moon's second wink, which means absolutely nothing but is said in hushed tones. They wear cloaks made of mismatched linens, chant in iambic pentameter, and spend a lot of time standing in puddles. You stumble upon one of their rituals by accident while trying to return a borrowed spoon. They invite you to join. You say you have soup to make. They nod solemnly and say, "The soup within is enough." You leave quickly. But the worst part isn't the moaning, the cult, or even the mysterious pregnancies. It's the lawsuit. A man named Grigor, who has never smiled, and whose beard may or may not be taxidermied, files an official grievance. He accuses his neighbor of deliberate nighttime arousal via theatrical moaning. The council asks for evidence. Grigor produces a goat, says it's a witness. The goat refuses to testify. Grigor takes this personally. You are somehow chosen as mediator, which is how you end up sitting between 2 men, one vibrating with rage, the other still wearing half a cloak and a suspicious grin, while a goat chews hay and stares at you with deep disappointment. The resolution involves a promise to keep all lunar rituals at least 20 feet from any water source, one apology loaf made with dill, and a strict no chanting after midnight policy. It is begrudgingly accepted. The full moon finally wanes. The village exhales. Elfrida's hens begin laying again, though one still caws like a crow. Osric names his next batch of charms, emotionally passive instead of protective, and sells them anyway. The children of the moon's second wink quietly rebrand as a poetry club, and you, still unsure how any of this happened, find yourself writing your name on a noise ordnance scroll just in case. Next full moon, you're going to lock your door, put on earmuffs, and pray no one knocks, offering you soup of the soul. Not again. It begins as most disasters do with someone's cold feet, specifically Widow Brambles. She makes a formal complaint to the village council about chronic nighttime exposure of the toes, which she claims is both a health concern and an omen of poor harvests. The complaint is written on cabbage leaf, signed in beet juice, and very hard to argue with because she hands it to you while shivering dramatically. You are now, somehow, on the blanket committee. There is only one blanket, a very large, very old, communal wool monstrosity known simply as the Warmth. It's scratchy, smells faintly of cheese, and weighs roughly as much as a sheep having a bad day. But it is beloved. It is shared. It is argued over with increasing intensity every night when temperatures drop and the frost starts creeping in like an uninvited uncle with opinions about marriage. The committee meets in the granary. Hilda chairs it, mostly because she has the loudest voice and refuses to let anyone else write on the chalkboard. Osric is there too, for some reason. He says he's representing the sensual interests of the village, which no one really understands and everyone immediately regrets asking about. The first hour is spent debating who gets the top half of the blanket. The second hour dissolves into heated accusations about hogging. By the third hour, someone suggests rotating shifts. Every villager gets blanket access for 45 minutes at a time, including designated turning periods. You propose something different. You suggest maybe people share in pairs, together, all night. The room goes silent. Hilda stares at you like you just proposed marrying a pine cone. Osric leans forward, fascinated. Go on, he purrs, as if this is about to get romantic. You explain, awkwardly, that if two people share the blanket, the warmth multiplies, or at least concentrates. Fewer cold toes, fewer arguments, potentially fewer cabbage leaf complaints. You call it sleeping monogamy. It is the most controversial idea since the goat tax. Repeal. The elders whisper. Someone faints, though it turns out they were just very bored. Eventually, the vote is cast. 12 in favor, 10 against. One abstains because they're emotionally entangled with the blanket itself and fear bias. The experiment begins that very night. Names are drawn. Pairs are assigned. You get matched with Imelda. Again, still unsure if she's real, but a warm body shows up beside you around dusk, carrying a jar of pickled onions and muttering something about dreams and destiny. The blanket, for once, stays still. Morning comes, and the village is different. There are yawns instead of arguments, snores instead of slaps. A strange newfound peace has settled like dew on everything. People wake up and happy, confused but happy. One couple announces their engagement. Another just makes eye contact for the first time in 6 years. It's working, until it doesn't. A new complaint arrives, this time from a man who claims his blanket partner toots in iambic pentameter, and he cannot endure such literary flatulence. Another insists their partner tried to braid their hair mid-snore. Someone else says their assigned sleeper licked them for warmth. A subcommittee is formed. You try to resign. You are not allowed to. By the end of the week, villagers have started pairing up voluntarily. Romantic partnerships bloom, yes, but also deeply confusing alliances like the butcher and the beekeeper, who now sleep wrapped around each other like ham and honey. The blanket, frayed and exhausted, is finally washed. It takes 6 men, 2 tubs, and an hour of collective chanting. You sit back, watching as the village hums in newfound nighttime unity, and you wonder, briefly, if this will be your legacy. Not a hero, not a healer, not even a decent turnip farmer, but the reluctant inventor of sleeping monogamy, which, honestly, sounds better than cold foot arbitrator. You're not exactly sure how it happens. 1 minute, you're walking past Widow Bertha's garden, thinking only of bees and your rapidly failing attempt at herbal foraging. The next, you're holding a warm pear, sticky sweet, and dusted with something suspiciously glittery. She places it in your hands without a word, just that small, knowing smile of hers that says, "Yes, I've buried 3 husbands, and yes, 2 of them died happy." You should say no. You should be polite. You should absolutely not bite into it while she watches from her wicker chair like a smug forest witch in retirement. But you do, because it smells like cinnamon and promises, and because your lunch was 3 hazelnuts and a piece of bark that may not have been edible. The pear is warm, soft, unnervingly sensual. You blink. Something inside you shifts. At first, you think it's just digestion. Maybe you've finally developed an allergy to joy. But then she pats your arm, calls you sweetling, and suddenly your knees feel like soft cheese left too long in the sun. You murmur something about the weather, which makes no sense because you're indoors now. Somehow, you don't remember walking inside. You're sitting on a floral cushion. There's a second pear. It's steaming. Across the village, rumors have been swirling for weeks. Men, tough ones, stoic ones who used to grunt at clouds, have been spotted weaving baskets, reciting poetry, and brushing Widow Bertha's cats, all after accepting a small treat from her garden. You thought it was nonsense. You now feel an overwhelming urge to help her thatch her roof. "Just a little something I make," she says, pouring you tea. "Cloves for warmth, cardamom for mystery, and love, of course." You sip. It tastes like secrets and possibly mild seduction. You clear your throat. Try to ask a logical question. "What's in the pear, Bertha? Why do I feel like writing your name on tree bark?" She just chuckles and says, "They always ask too late." Your hands are sweaty. You do not sweat. You're not even warm. Except you are. You're glowing. From your soul. You stumble out of her cottage an hour later, pockets full of pears you don't remember accepting. Your lips tingle. You wave to 3 people you've never acknowledged before. One of them is a pig. You don't care. By evening, you've helped repair her fence, refilled her well, and caught her rooster, which has been missing for 3 days and answers only to Reginald. You sit at your own table later, alone, pears on the shelf, hands slightly trembling. You can still smell her like lavender and dominance. There is a knock. It's Osric. He looks hollowed out, like someone who's been emotionally wrung dry by affection. "You too?" he asks. You nod. "She's unstoppable," he says, eyes wide. You both sit in silence, haunted by warmth and baked fruit. Eventually, you start hearing whispers of a love hex council. It meets on Thursdays. The first agenda item is how to say no to peers. You attend. You fail. You're back at Bertha's the next week, offering to organize her spice rack and sharpen her knitting needles. She gives you a 3rd pear. You don't even chew this time. It's not a hex. That's the worst part. It's just kindness and perfectly balanced seasoning. And that might be the most powerful spell of all. You never thought your future would involve a chicken tribunal. But here you are, hunched on a wobbly stool with a damp quill in one hand and a scroll made of questionable parchment in the other, preparing to take official testimony from a hen named Clotilde. She's sitting on a carved wooden perch like she owns the place, which, given the way people tiptoe around her, she sort of does. 3 scandals, 1 witness. 2.5 hours of furious clucking. The first case involves Imelda and the baker's apprentice, and something called unauthorized dough sharing. You have no idea what that means, but the innkeeper's wife fainted when it was announced, so it's probably scandalous. Clotilda apparently saw the whole thing from her perch above the oven, and now, due to ancient village law written by someone who clearly lacked hobbies, she is entitled to give her account. Unfortunately, Clotilde does not speak. She performs. The trial begins in the center of the town square, where the hay has been swept and the goose relocated to a less distracting distance. Clotilde is placed on a small podium beside a bowl of barley and a miniature gavel that she refuses to use. You, as the scribe, are seated nearby with the unenviable task of translating interpretive pecking into legal documentation. She starts with a low squawk and a pointed glance at the apprentice. You scribble. Clotilde expresses disapproval. She flaps once, dramatically, then pecks the ground 3 times. 3 violations, you mutter, writing furiously. Then she walks in a circle, lifts one claw, and stares directly into Imelda's soul. Complicity confirmed. The baker sobs. The apprentice attempts to flee but is tackled by the midwife, who is surprisingly fast when scandal's involved. Trial 1 concludes with a fine of 12 turnips and a public apology to the bread. You're not even sure how that last part is enforced, but the apprentice is now kneeling in front of a loaf, whispering to it like he's confessing to a priest. The second case is worse. Apparently, Osric was caught moonbathing again with someone's cousin, possibly his own. Clotilde, of course, had a clear view from the barn rafters and is more than willing to reenact the moment using a series of indignant hops and what can only be described as morally disappointed clucks. At one point she flaps so violently you duck, thinking she's finally snapped. But no, she's just imitating the thrashing of limbs beneath a blanket. Osric waves from the pillory with his usual charm and a slightly bruised ego. Tell her, I said. Hello. Clotilde pecks in response. Once. Hard. You right. The chicken acknowledges the accused with disdain. The third case is murky. It involves the blacksmith's wife, a traveling lute player, and a very suspicious basket of jam. Clotilde gives her most impassioned testimony yet, fluttering onto the judge's shoulder and letting out a warbling screech that sounds like betrayal dipped in syrup. By now, the entire village is watching. Children mimic the chicken's movements. Elders nod as if this all makes perfect sense. You, meanwhile, are wondering if you've accidentally invented poultry jurisprudence. After hours of scribbling, translating, and ducking flying feathers, you're exhausted. Your hands are ink-stained. Your brain is full of implied barn affairs. And Clotilde is just getting started, now pacing like a feathery prosecutor in a dusty courtroom drama. Finally, the judge, a man who once fainted at the sight of a particularly aggressive radish, stands and declares, Clotilde has spoken. Everyone claps. Clotilde bows. Later that evening, you try to relax at the tavern, but someone's already written a ballad about the chicken who knew too much. It's oddly catchy. You hum it all the way home. As you pass the coop, Clotilde watches you with one beady eye. You nod politely. She pecks once at the ground. You have no idea what it means, but you write it down anyway. You were told it would be a night of sacred tradition, a moon-blessed gathering of hearts and harvests, celebrating fertility, unity, and apparently turnips. You nod solemnly with everyone else, even though someone just handed you a bowl of what they're calling sensual glaze, and it smells like roasted parsnip and mild soap. The festival begins at twilight, when the air is thick with smoke from too many herbs and not enough fire safety. Villagers gather in a circle, painted in swirls of ochre and beet juice, all murmuring something that sounds vaguely like a chant, but mostly resembles synchronized mumbling. You try to join in, but your chant is half a beat off, and now a child is staring at you like you've cursed the entire crop. You are not reassured when the healer winks and paints a spiral on your forehead using something she describes only as moon spice. It tingles, not in a good way. You try not to scratch it, mostly because the last person who did is now howling at a shrub and calling it his soul mirror. A minstrel starts playing a haunting melody on an instrument that looks like it was made from a gourd and bad intentions. People sway, bodies move, clothes become optional. You attempt to dance, which feels less like swaying and more like flailing politely. Someone mistakes this for a mating signal. You are handed a roasted carrot with a ribbon tied around it. You say thank you, as is custom. Then immediately panic when you realize that, here, vegetables mean something. There's a table with what's called body oil, but it's really just mashed tubers mixed with goose fat and thyme. You are peer pressured into having your arms basted like a holiday roast. You smell disturbingly edible. That's when someone introduces the game. It involves blindfolds, light chanting, and a barrel. You do not catch all the rules, mostly because a woman named Thistle is whispering moon proverbs in your ear while massaging turnip paste into your shoulders. You nod at the wrong moment and are suddenly volunteered as the offering. You are placed inside a barrel. There is cheering, possibly for you. The lid is placed gently but firmly on top. You hear tapping. You think it might be part of a rhythm game until you realize someone is hammering something shut. The barrel tilts. You are now horizontal. There is rolling. There is laughter. It's not yours. Then, a splash. You are in the river. The night air is cold and wet and smells like soggy lust and regret. The barrel bobs gently, spinning as it floats past your house, the mill, and the herbalist's hut where you once bought questionable tea and accidentally agreed to marry her cousin. That cousin waves as you float by. You don't wave back. Inside the barrel, things are moist and tuber-scented. You consider your life choices. You wonder how anyone made it through the 1300s without developing a deep mistrust of root vegetables. Eventually, the barrel wedges itself against a log near the shallows. You crawl out, soaked, sticky, and smelling like a stew gone horribly philosophical. Your feet squish as you walk back into the village. The festival is still going. No one notices you're gone. Or perhaps they do, but they think your voyage was part of the ritual. Someone later calls it a symbolic journey of release. You call it getting dumped in a river while basted in oil. The next morning, you wake up in your hut, wrapped in a borrowed shawl, and holding a single painted turnip with your name carved into it. You don't know what that means, but it feels ominous. Outside, Clotilde the chicken watches you from the fence post. She squawks once, judgmentally. You bow your head, not because she deserves it, but because you don't want to explain how you ended up in the river again. It's just you and the oven, ancient, cracked, and vaguely shaped like a reclining toad. It squats at the back of the communal baking shed like it's heard every sin the village has ever kneaded into dough. The stones are warm beneath your palms, and the air smells faintly of singed flour and secrets. Supposedly, confessions to the bread oven go nowhere. You whisper. The heat carries it away, and your shame gets absorbed into the sacred crust of village anonymity. You're told it's cleansing. You're told it's private. You are told wrong. Still, it's tradition, and you've reached the point where tradition is slightly less embarrassing than carrying this memory around like a haunted turnip. So, under cover of dusk and plausible deniability, you crouch before the oven, heart pounding, hands sweating, and quietly admit that you once had a dream. A vivid, profoundly confusing dream involving Father Aldrich, a plum tart, and something that may or may not have been whipped cream. You finish the confession in a whisper so faint you're not even sure you said it out loud. You place a small offering, half a scone, and a wilted violet on the stone ledge, then scurry off like a sinner with a schedule. It should end there. The next morning, things feel off. The baker's assistant won't meet your eyes. The innkeeper smirks when you order porridge. Father Aldrich coughs politely when you walk past. And for the first time in recorded history, refuses a second helping of jam. Then worst of all, someone leaves a plum tart outside your door. It's still warm. You stare at it like it's ticking. Clotilde clucks at you from the fence with what sounds suspiciously like laughter. You try to play it cool. You thank the person who left it, loudly, in the vague direction of the village square. You claim plum is your least favorite fruit. You eat the tart anyway, out of spite and mild hunger, but your nerves are frayed, and your dignity is peeling faster than last year's turnip paint. By noon, you overhear two washerwomen at the riverbank whispering about a particularly saucy dream and an even saucier tart. One of them uses the phrase sinful glaze. The other fans herself with a cabbage leaf. You consider faking an illness or a pilgrimage. Instead, you march somewhat dramatically back to the baking shed, determined to confront whoever breached the sacred trust of oven confession. The door creaks open, and there, in the shadows behind a sack of millet, sits Marius, the candlemaker's son, too curious for his own good, and apparently in possession of ears as sharp as his chin. He's holding a half-eaten biscuit and a guilty expression. I wasn't eavesdropping, he says, crumbs betraying him. You stare at him. I was just resting, with my ears, in that direction. You squint. I thought you said Father Aldrich in a plum cart. I didn't mean to misunderstand the context. You squint harder. Marius crumbles. Okay, fine. I heard everything. But I only told my cousin, and my cousin's goat, who then told someone else. It's not my fault if the goat has loose morals. That afternoon, someone starts humming a song titled The Tart of Temptation Near the Well. You drop your bucket in response and leave it there. You pass Father Aldrich again, and he nods solemnly, handing you a basket of overripe plums. You both pretend it's for jam. You both know it isn't. Desperate to reclaim control of the narrative, you make a show of confessing something new to the bread oven that evening. Something boring, something safe. I once stole a beet. You whisper it twice. For emphasis, you leave no offering this time. You want it to feel less ceremonial, more casual. You want people to hear it, think that's the real scandal, and forget the tart. By morning, someone leaves a beet on your doorstep. With a note, it reads, "Don't worry, your sins are delicious." The handwriting is suspiciously flowery. Clotilde clucks again, and this time, it sounds like applause. You wake up to bells. Not the normal, steady clang that marks time or impending sermons, but a manic, clattering sound, like someone's having an argument with God through percussion. You stumble outside, squinting into the morning glare, and that's when you see it. Dangling from the church bell, fluttering in the cold breeze like a scandalized dove, is a piece of lace. Not just any lace, intimate lace. Someone gasps. Someone else faints. The priest makes the sign of the cross so aggressively it looks like he's warding off bees. And then, in the slow, awful way, things spread in a small village with too much time and too little entertainment. The rumor blooms. Within the hour, half the village has gathered beneath the bell tower, all staring upward like pilgrims witnessing divine humiliation. Children are being dragged home by their ears. The baker is selling sin buns. The blacksmith claims he can identify the stitching. You should walk away. You don't. Because the moment you take one step back, someone shouts, "We need a judge." And before you can object, all eyes turn to you. You blink. Why me? Because, Hilda says, arms crossed. You look like someone who's once read something. That's how you become the presiding authority of the first and hopefully last stolen underwear tribunal. They set up the trial in the churchyard. There's a bench for the accused, 3 for spectators, and a goat tied to a fence that everyone keeps insisting is a character witness. You're given a crude wooden gavel and a hat that's supposed to symbolize authority, but looks suspiciously like a cooking pot. You clear your throat. We shall proceed with jurisprudence. You pause, trying to sound dignified. Jurisprudential integrity. No one knows what that means, but they nod solemnly, so you keep saying it whenever you need to buy time. The accused is a young thatcher named Milo, whose greatest crime up until now has been excessive confidence and very little upper body strength. He insists he's innocent. I was repairing the roof. I didn't even see the item until it hit me in the face. The crowd murmurs. The goat sneezes. You jot something on your parchment to look official, though you're just drawing spirals. Who discovered the evidence? You ask. A woman steps forward, chin lifted high. Widow Bramble. Of course. Her nose could sniff out impropriety from 3 parishes away. She claims she came to ring the bell for morning prayers and found the unholy article entangled among the ropes of righteousness. She holds up the garment delicately, as though it might burst into flames or confess. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Someone in the back mutters, "Fine needlework." You try to restore order. Please, composure. We must let the facts, jurisprudence speak for themselves. The priest coughs. This is not a matter of jurisprudence. This is a matter of moral decay. You nod wisely. Precisely. And jurisprudence shall decide which decay is more moral. The priest blinks, defeated. The trial spirals quickly. Every witness contradicts the last. One woman swears she saw the laundry line shaking near the apothecary's hut. The apothecary insists the line was hexed by wind spirits. Osric raises his hand to declare he once saw lace that looked exactly like that on a traveling performer in 1324, which contributes nothing but gets him applause. Eventually, the conversation turns to motive. Why would someone steal such an item? Theories bloom like mold. Love, spell, practical joke, possessed crow. At one point, the goat sneezes again, and half the crowd crosses themselves, certain it's an omen. Then, an unexpected twist, a confession. The blacksmith's apprentice, red-faced and trembling, steps forward. It was me. A collective gasp. He stammers through an explanation. He says he was dared, that he only meant to hang it from the tavern sign, but tripped, and somehow the church bell rope got involved. It was the wind, he pleads, and maybe a little cider. The priest looks ready to excommunicate him on the spot, but you raise your hand for silence. Under the power of jurisprudence, you begin, dramatically, we shall reach a verdict of mild disgrace and community service. There's murmuring, some nods. The goat sneezes one final time, sealing the decision. The punishment, 1 week of cleaning the bell tower and a formal apology to all aggrieved parties and fabrics. The trial ends. The crowd disperses, satisfied, but slightly. Disappointed there wasn't an execution. The priest blesses the rope. Widow Bramble pockets the lace for evidence, and definitely not for later gossip. As for you, the so-called judge, you remove your pot hat and hand back the gavel. That night, while walking home, you hear the faint toll of the bell again. You look up. Something's hanging from it. Not lace this time, just a sock. You sigh. Justice, it seems, is an ongoing project. It begins, as so many things do in this village, with a squeal and misplaced enthusiasm. You're halfway through, mending your thatch, when you hear it. A shriek from the pig pen, followed by applause. You look over to see the butcher and the miller's wife clapping like they've just witnessed divine intervention. Between them stand 2 pigs, massive, pink, and gazing at each other with the kind of intensity that suggests either romance or imminent disaster. They're in love, the miller's wife announces, wiping away a tear. They're pigs, you reply, but no one listens. Within hours, word spreads. The story becomes legend. Apparently, these 2 swine, Brutus and Petunia, met at last month's feeding trough and have been inseparable ever since. People start talking about destiny, about true love, about how rare it is to see affection so pure. You assume it'll fade by morning. It doesn't. By sunset, there's talk of a wedding. And because you once helped organize a maypole dance without it collapsing into chaos, you are now, somehow, the village's foremost expert in romantic logistics, which is why you're standing in the square the next day, surrounded by piles of wildflowers, two half-drunk musicians, and a priest who keeps muttering, "This is not in the scripture," while adjusting his hat nervously. The ceremony, you're told, must be perfect. The pigs deserve that much. There's even a guest list, 30 people, 3 goats, and a chicken who represents the broader barnyard community. Osric volunteers to compose the music. This is a mistake. His only instrument is a cracked lute, and the first song he writes is suspiciously similar to the funeral dirge he played at your neighbor's wake. Still, it's heartfelt. By noon, Petunia is draped in a garland of daisies and chewing thoughtfully on the bouquet. Brutus stands proudly beside her, snorting with what can only be described as anticipation. The priest sighs and raises his hands. The villagers hush. You hand out petals to throw after the vows. Someone lights incense that smells like burnt cabbage and hope. Everything goes surprisingly smoothly until the blessing of union begins. Tradition, according to the self-appointed wedding committee led by the miller's wife, who's vibrating with excitement, requires a symbolic joining. Normally, this involves tying the couple's hands together. Pigs, of course, have no hands, so they improvise. You are given a ribbon. You are told to tie it around the groom's leg. Only no one specifies which pig is the groom. You choose the one on the left because it's slightly larger, slightly prouder, and making the kind of deep grunting noises you assume indicate masculinity. You tie the ribbon neatly, step back, and nod to the priest. He blesses them both. The crowd cheers. The lute wails. Then someone shouts, "Wait, Petunia's on the left." The entire square freezes. The butcher gasps. The miller's wife clutches her chest. The priest drops his holy water. You look at the pigs. They're both unfazed. One of them is still chewing daisies. The other has decided this is an excellent moment for a nap. But the villagers are scandalized. Half insist the marriage is invalid. The other half declare it progressive. Osric starts strumming a faster tune to match the rising chaos, which only makes things worse. The goats begin to bleat in protest. The chicken panics, and the priest, pale and trembling, says, "He's seen enough unholy unions for one lifetime." In the end, the pigs wander off, blissfully unaware of the uproar they've caused. The crowd disperses slowly, muttering about annulments and divine signs. Someone suggests throwing another ceremony just to be safe. You suggest everyone go home. That night, as the moon rises, you see Brutus and Petunia side by side in the mud, content and snoring in harmony. You can't help but smile, because for all the noise and nonsense, they seem to understand love better than anyone else here. It begins with Brother Cedric standing on a barrel in the middle of the square, his arms stretched toward heaven, his voice cracking like old wood. "Desire," he shouts, "is the devil's kindling." He's trembling, eyes wild, as if he's just personally seen lust crawl out of someone's soup. The crowd stares. Someone coughs. Someone else snickers. You'd think that would be the end of it. But no, Cedric declares a pact, a village-wide abstinence movement, effective immediately, to purify the soul and reclaim moral hygiene. He calls it the Great Abstinence Pact of Tuesday. No one asks why Tuesday, but it feels ominous. At first, people agree out of politeness. It's easier than arguing with a man holding both a Bible and a turnip like props. He gathers signatures on a piece of parchment the size of a tablecloth. You don't sign it, mostly because you're not sure what counts as participation, and you're not about to get into a debate about hand-holding ethics. By noon, the pact has taken effect. Husbands and wives begin avoiding eye contact like it's contagious. Couples sit on opposite ends of benches, hands folded, lips pressed tight, as if conversation itself might be sinful. The tavern serves only cold stew now, so as not to arouse the appetite. Someone covers the goat statue near the well, because its pose is suggestive. The air grows tense, weirdly quiet. Even the birds seem uncomfortable. But it doesn't last. By mid-afternoon, the rebellion begins. It starts with the baker, of all people, who's had enough of Cedric's sanctimonious shouting and decides to bake temptation back into the world. He storms into his shop, slams the shutters, and when he re-emerges, his arms are dusted with flour and his eyes burn with mischief. He's made bread shaped like things the church wouldn't approve of. People gather around, pretending to be horrified, but they're all smiling. Within minutes, he's out of stock. Someone whispers that the blacksmith's wife traded 2 onions for a loaf, with character. Word spreads fast. The tavern reopens its back room for spiritual discussion, which quickly devolves into laughter, spilled ale, and questionable dance moves. The lute player starts strumming a tune called "Saints Can't Stop Us Now," and half the village hums along. Cedric tries to rally his followers, but there aren't many left. Even the priest is gone, claiming he needs to check on the moral state of the cider barrels. By sunset, the entire village has erupted. People fling flour at each other in a kind of sticky rebellion. Couples kiss under the pretense of symbolic forgiveness. Someone streaks through the square shouting, "Down with purity." Before tripping over a chicken, you duck into a pantry for safety, heart pounding, covered in a fine layer of someone else's bread dough. Outside, chaos reigns. The sounds of laughter, argument, and enthusiastic reconciliation echo through the night. You peek through a crack in the door just in time to see Cedric standing in the square again, drenched in flour and moral outrage, trying to shout over the din. His voice is hoarse, his sermon drowned out by the rhythmic thumping of a drum someone's repurposed from a cider keg. "Resist!" he yells. "Resist temptation!" A loaf of bread hits him square in the chest. By the 7th hour, the pact collapses completely. Couples embrace openly in the streets. The tavern overflows with ale and song, and someone crowns the baker saint of sensual pastries. Cedric flees, muttering about Gomorrah and indigestion. You emerge from the pantry cautiously, brushing flour from your hair. The night smells of yeast, sweat, and triumph. A few villagers are still dancing, covered head to toe in dough, looking oddly victorious. In the distance, the bell tolls midnight. The great abstinence pact of Tuesday has ended spectacularly, and by Wednesday morning, no one will ever mention it again. The monk arrives at dawn, barefoot, hollow-eyed, and shouting about fire. His robes are torn, his beard wild enough to house several opinions, and he's carrying a bell that he rings with the kind of manic joy only possessed by someone absolutely certain the world is ending. He collapses in the middle of the square, wheezing. The end is nigh. The sky will split. The seas will boil. All because of your urges. He points vaguely toward everyone and everything, livestock included. At first, no one takes him seriously. The villagers are used to travelers with doom in their pockets. But this one is different. He's got charisma and pamphlets. Within an hour, he's convinced half the town that Judgment Day will arrive before supper. The other half just wants to know if supper's still happening. You watch as panic spreads faster than the plague ever did. The blacksmith boards up his windows. The priest starts confessing to people instead of the other way around. Even Clotilda the chicken refuses to come down from her perch, as if she knows divine wrath tends to start from above. Then someone, probably Osric, declares, "If the world's ending, we may as well go out full and happy." It's all the encouragement anyone needs. By sunset, the entire village has transformed into a feast that borders on blasphemy. Tables stretch down the main road, loaded with every edible thing that's ever existed, or at least convincingly resembles food. Roasted geese, half-stale bread soaked in honey, barrels of mead that haven't seen moderation since sunrise. The monk tries to protest, but someone shoves a pie into his hands, and he's too polite to refuse divine hospitality. You're swept along in the chaos. Music starts badly tuned but enthusiastic, and people dance with the kind of abandon reserved for those who think consequences have an expiration date. You lose track of who's singing what. There's laughter, shouting, and someone trying to juggle turnips while reciting scripture. You drink. You don't mean to, but it's hard not to when a smiling farmer insists, "It's your last day, friend." The mead is strong and sweet and burns in a way that feels honest. You can't remember the last time you laughed this hard. Maybe never. Somewhere between the third toast and the fifth questionable dance, you find yourself sitting beside someone soft-eyed, flushed, hair tangled by the wind. You've seen them before at market, but never like this. They're smiling, a little shy, a little wild. You talk about nothing, the stars, the pigs, the absurdity of existence. You tell them about the time you mistook a goat for a prophet. They laugh so hard they spill their drink. The monk, meanwhile, is preaching to a wheelbarrow, declaring salvation to its handles. No one notices. The feast is too loud, too alive. Midnight comes, and with it, silence. The mead runs low. The fires burn to embers. People look up at the sky, waiting for it to split open, for something grand, something final. But nothing happens. The stars just blink back, ancient and unimpressed. Someone snorts, then giggles. Then laughter spreads like a wave. Relief, mockery, joy, it doesn't matter which. The world isn't ending, and everyone's too drunk to care. You look back at the person beside you. Their eyes catch the last flicker of the firelight. The monk snores against a barrel, still clutching his bell. Someone starts singing again, softer this time, and for a moment, everything feels still. Then you kiss them. It's not a dramatic kiss. No music swells, no angels sing, no lightning strikes the church. It's warm, clumsy, and tastes faintly of honey and smoke. When you pull away, they laugh, leaning their forehead against yours. You don't know what it means. Maybe it's love. Maybe it's the mead. Maybe it's just the relief of being alive when you weren't supposed to be. But as the first light of dawn creeps over the thatched rooftops and the village snores in content disarray, it feels like something. And for now, that's enough.